Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dantel Proctor from the National Student Attendance Engagement and Success Center. Welcome to today's session, Managing an Effective School Integrated Mentoring Program. Please allow me to share some brief details about the session. Today's presenter is Delia Hagan. Delia is a licensed certified social worker serving as a program director at Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership. In this role, Delia supports the development of the National Mentoring Resource Center, a comprehensive online resource hub for the mentoring field. Delia also manages national programmatic initiatives, including training and technical assistance efforts for Mentor's national education initiatives. Today's session will last for approximately 45 minutes and is being recorded. We'd like to encourage everyone to utilize the chat function at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen to submit questions or comments for our presenters. Please be sure to select everyone from the drop-down box to ensure that your comments and questions are seen by me and our speakers. You may submit your questions throughout the presentation, and we'll leave time at the end to address as many questions as possible. If we do not have enough time to get through all of the questions, we will reply to all participants by email within the next 5 to 7 days. All participants have been placed on mute to avoid background noise. Please don't unmute yourself. Instead, refer to the chat function on the right side of the screen if you have a question or a comment. Following the Q&A portion of our session, there will be a very brief poll. Your participation in the poll is extremely important to helping us better prepare our presentations and ensure that we're delivering content to you in a way that best suits your needs. We greatly appreciate your feedback to these questions. Before I hand the session over to Delia, I would like to remind folks of the upcoming webinars that will be held in November. More information and the link to register for these is included on the last slide of the presentation. Also, I'd like to share with you the mission of the National Student Attendance Engagement and Success Center. The mission of the center is to disseminate evidence-based practices and build and facilitate communities of practice to help students attend every day, be engaged in school, and succeed academically so that they graduate high school prepared for college, career, and civic life. Delia, I pass it on to you now.
Thank you so much, Dantel, for that great introduction. And I see that we have three Going Strong participants here from across the country. I see 3 names popping up on our attendee list. So I'm hoping that you 3, who are sort of only the strong survive. I know it's been a long day of lots of information being shared, and I'm hoping that maybe you're joining because you want some more information about what this work really looks like. If you're interested in running a Success Mentors program or another type of school integrated mentoring program at your school or at your district, what can you do? What can you really do? Starting to dig into what does this look like, and where's some actionable information of where I can start to kind of launch this and make this happen. So that's what we're intending to do in the next 45 minutes. I know that's a tall order, but I've got a great teammate who you may have heard me chatting with before we started, Darren Person, who's going to try to help, from the actual district point of view as someone who's really a practitioner in this work to make this real. And then, I'm speaking to you from Mentor. We're a national partner in the National Center. We really are trying to bring training and technical assistance around mentoring best practices to this work because we do so much around research on what works in mentoring in all different types of settings. But we're really, really passionate about the work that the center is doing to bring mentoring to schools and districts because we see this as a really critical strategy for us to help us close the mentoring gap. That's our mission here at Mentor, and if you joined us earlier today, you heard a lot more about that. But again, we want to really dig into the strategies and just jump right in. So I won't waste too much time introducing myself, and I'll get right into it. But I did want to ask, for the 3 folks that we do have on the line, if you could make yourself at home with that chat feature and that Q&A feature, that's a great way for you to just type comments and questions that you have as we're going through, and that way we can customize this and make it really useful for you as much as we possibly can. I know Darren and I both want to make this useful for you folks. And you can also, what we'd love is for you to tell us a little bit about yourself in either the Q&A or the chat box. And that way we can, start to make some connections between the work that you're doing and what we're trying to share with you today. So that's all I'll share about Mentor. What I will say is that Mentor has two really important resources that I'm trying to highlight today, one of which is the Elements of Effective Practice for Mentoring, which I'll share a bit about. That's what this session is really based on, is trying to customize these benchmarks that we've created. It's one of our biggest pieces of work here at Mentor, is developing these benchmarks for safe and effective mentoring programs. And what we've done is actually created a checklist for Success Mentors programs that can help customize those elements to your school, to your Success Mentors program, and make this a reality at your school, and try to help you, apply those best practices to your work. So I'm going to be talking about that. I also want to let everyone know that we have a group of, if you weren't with us earlier this afternoon, we have a group of extremely passionate local affiliates, state and local affiliates across the country, 26 of them. So if you don't know who your affiliate is, I hope you'll reach out to me. I'll give you my email at the end of the webinar so that you can get connected to your state or local affiliate. Those folks are really our boots on the ground. They're our trainers and our capacity builders. They really support schools and other types of programs in making sure that they have all the resources and supports that they need, and they're able to offer a lot of that support at no cost through the National Center, and also through the National Mentoring Resource Center, which is a Department of Justice funded project that Mentor and our affiliates work on to really support mentoring programs and make sure that they are safe and effective. So that's why we're here, and that's why we're a part of this work. So I don't know how many of you were present earlier at the session, and maybe you can type in to the chat box whether or not you joined us earlier for the strengthening your EWS strategy through Success Mentors. That'll just help me not be repetitive if you could type that in there for us. And I do see someone introducing herself. It's Lee, a school social worker, focuses on attendance and working on creating a mentor program at your charter school. That is awesome, Lee. Thank you for sharing that. That's really helpful. So this is going to be really relevant to you. And that's actually similar role to the role that Darren plays, so hopefully he can give you some tips. It sounds like you were present earlier, so I won't be too redundant with the info I share. Thanks for sharing that. So what I will say is that Mentor, I wanted to give you a little bit of background on what this term school integrated mentoring means, because we've been talking a lot about that in our sessions during this conference, school integrated mentoring. So I just wanted to give a little background on this. In the mentoring field, we talk a ton about, and we have, for years and years, talked about school-based mentoring, best practices for school-based mentoring. School-based mentoring is a great strategy for bringing mentoring into a school environment, right? So it might be a partnership with Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, or another type of community-based program just provides mentoring at your school, so students have an opportunity to opt into a school program, or maybe it's a literacy-focused program that sort of a lunch buddies type. There's lots and lots of different school-based mentoring models, and they're very, very effective in helping work towards all different types of student outcomes, from, increasing literacy to high school graduation to attendance. So that's something that we know is a really promising strategy in our field. But recently, since the launch of the My Brother's Keeper Success Mentors initiative, Mentor, here at National, we've really started to think a little bit about how can schools and districts actually integrate mentoring and relationships into their school environment, and even at the district level. And that's something that Darren will be able to speak to a little bit later. What does it look like to actually bring this to another level rather than just offering mentoring at the school? What does it look like to really, really intentionally support that and make that a reality and build it into the culture of the school? So I just wanted to call that out as something that, that's where we're moving here at Mentor National. We really want to embrace school integrated mentoring and build out best practices for that framework, rather than, school-based mentoring, which has been a more traditional model that's used in the past. And Success Mentors is an example of this. So that's a strategy that a lot of schools and districts across the country have been thinking about and actually using to really make that a reality and to build mentoring and relationships into the fabric of their school. It has some pretty transformative results, as you'll hear and as you have been hearing. I did just want to go back to my chat box here because I see another introduction. This is Sandra Hebert, the Education Director for a federally recognized Indian tribe in Alabama, working to curb an out-of-control truancy problem among our tribal children. So it sounds like, Sandra, you're here because you want to think about solutions to address the truancy issue in your community. So appreciate you being on with us, and we'll try to we'll try to make sure that, that this is really relevant for what you're thinking about. So thank you both for introducing yourselves, and please feel free to stay active in that chat box. So I'm not going to go into this slide too much because we did talk about that early, and it sounds like at least some of you were with us earlier. But this is, really a picture, a map of the Success Mentors program and what it can look like to integrate mentoring into your school system or your district system. So it involves not only these whole school strategies, this welcoming environment, this family-centered environment that you're building into your school culture, and then it also involves, providing targeted supports for students who need more support, and that's really what mentoring, facilitated mentoring relationship can do for students who are either at risk or who are chronically absent. And then there's this idea of data sharing and creating this feedback loop between mentors and the school administrators and the community-based organizations that are bringing social services into the school, and the importance of sharing that information about student needs, both individual student needs and, patterns, looking at patterns and larger trends that are affecting students so that, those large-scale strategies and the individual interventions are really mapped to the accurate needs of students. So again, won't go too deeply into that because we did cover it earlier. I'm also going to gloss over this slide too because I mentioned it on our last session, but I just think it's so important whenever we think about mentoring here at Mentor for schools, and when we think about school integrated mentoring, we really think that these concepts are just so fundamental to making sure that mentoring works. We think that it needs to be grounded in positive youth development, giving kids opportunities to build skills and exercise their own interests and their own abilities. We know that mentoring has to be culturally relevant if it's going to be effective. If you aren't familiar with the information that Search Institute puts out about developmental relationships, that's very much what our work is grounded in, so I definitely recommend reaching out and learning more about their framework for developmental relationships, which really is just about partnering with students rather than being prescribed and telling them what to do and telling them what's best for them, forming relationships that really show a partnership and show respect for the student and their own needs and their own goals. Which plays into this youth-centered, programming idea and the strengths-based mentoring idea. So just some things that I wanted to remind us about as we move into our conversation about concrete strategies and what this role of the mentoring coordinator really looks like when you are designing and launching these programs. But I did want to briefly pull in my friend Darren for a little bit of help on this slide. And Darren, feel free to tell me if you don't want to speak to this. But it's something that's been coming up a lot during our conference, just in lots of different sessions, especially in the conversations we're having about mentoring. We keep saying that these relationships have to be strengths-based and these programs have to be strengths-based. And so I just wanted to see if we could have a quick conversation before we launch into some of our content about what that really means, because I think it's so important. We try to train our mentors to start to see students as a whole student, to think about some of the things that they are bringing to the table and not to think about just this issue of attendance that is what we're so focused on. We know that they're not going to be able to form an authentic relationship with a student until they see them for who they are and they see, a lot of the positive things that they're bringing. And the reason I show this image of a calendar when we talk about strengths-based messaging is, one very simple way that I've heard Success Mentors programs use a strengths-based approach is by tracking the days that students are in school instead of the days that they're not in school. And I think it's this very simple thing that can make a huge difference, not only in the way that we see students, but in the way that they see themselves and the way that they know that they're being perceived by adults in the school. If adults are tuning into when they are there more than when they aren't. Obviously, it's so important to reach out when they're not there, but really celebrating and noting and acknowledging when they are there. Just a sort of a simple way to sort of flip the script and make sure that we are keeping ourselves accountable for this idea of strengths-based programming. And Darren, just wanted to see if you had anything to share about that, because I know you think a lot about that in your work.
Oh, no, thank you, Adela. You know, for us, I mean, as I think about strength-based, especially when we conduct our training for our mentors, we do 3 trainings during the year, and when we introduce or we do our orientation, we do come from that framework of strengths-based perspective. Some of the areas that we really focused on is one, as a mentor, being non-judgmental, but also being a person that's empathetic, that shows empathy to the student, making sure that that base is solid within the person and moving forward. And what we try to do, even within our success mentoring program, to the point you made earlier, is to really be focused on their strengths, be focused on the positives, and have a positive message. I think for us, and I'm a social worker in nature and even in profession, sometimes the families that we deal with have had a moment of working with professionals, and it might be that it hasn't been always positive, and that's not to blame the social worker or the other individual. But what we try to use our mentors for is that friend or that person that is non-judgmental, that can really just talk about the positives. And we find that has been very good for our mentees as well as our mentors.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for just, you know, helping illustrate what this really looks like in a real program. That's so helpful. And we're going to hear more from Darren in a little bit just about his experience facilitating these programs. So as I've been saying, this session is really about sort of the mentor coordinator role. It sounds like we do have a few mentor coordinators or folks that are going to actually be implementing these programs in a school or in a district, and that's great because that's what this session is about. So what I want to talk to you about over the next few minutes, and then I'm going to turn it over to Darren to talk about his experience a little bit. I know we don't have a ton of time. Is really this idea of, you know, what does a mentor coordinator who's going to design and launch one of these programs, what do they really do? What does this look like? What should you be thinking about if you're thinking about launching one of these programs? I'm not going to be able to do justice to any of these today. I'm just going to kind of walk through each of them and give you a very brief sort of definition of each of these. But these 6 elements, recruitment, screening, training, matching, monitoring and support, and closure are the 6 elements of effective practice that Mentor has outlined in our publication here. And what I wanted to highlight for you is if you look at this handout that is in your handouts tab, you'll see this checklist that we created, and that's really what this is based on. So if you want to follow along as I'm going through this, and just sort of make note of some things that you have questions about, you know, we'd be happy to work with you a little bit more offline and have you reach out to us and talk through some of your questions after the session. But just going to give you a picture of what this can look like if you are thinking about implementing a program. So I'm going to start with recruitment. And recruitment, when we talk about recruitment, we talk about not just mentors, but also mentees. So you have to think about recruiting mentees and families, and what is the messaging that you want to be sending about your program to mentees and families. That can really make or break whether kids are interested, whether families are interested, whether they feel threatened by the program or judged by the program. The messaging is so huge for, you know, the flyers, the letters, the, you know, phone calls that you make home to talk to kids and parents about the program and what it is. One of the big tips that we have here is to talk about this program as an opportunity for the student to get a little bit more support and to have someone in the school who's really looking out for them and cheering them on, and an opportunity to get to know someone that they may not have otherwise gotten to know. So we really want to message it that way. And when we talk about recruitment, we're also talking about mentors, and this is one of the biggest questions that we get from mentoring programs or Success Mentors programs, school-based mentoring programs. How do I recruit enough mentors to meet the needs that I have? I have so many students who are absent or chronically absent, and just not enough mentors. And so it's hard, and I think what we have learned is that internal champions, so champions at the district level and at the school level who can really motivate and speak to, one-on-one teachers, school staff, adults in the school, core members, and try to help them understand, why mentoring might be a good fit for them or how they're already doing mentoring. They may not call it that, but, why not receive a little bit more support and recognition for things that they're already doing. So when you're recruiting internal volunteers, from your staff, just thinking about how you might be able to sort of build from what they're already doing and make this opportunity, something easy for them, but also something that they feel proud of. One thing I really want to highlight here, and I know I'm going so quickly through each of these, is the importance of partnerships with community-based organizations. We know National Service Corps programs have been so essential to the success of a lot of Success Mentors programs. Programs like AmeriCorps, programs like Senior Corps, programs like City Year. They have brought so many more adults into the school environment who are positioned to be mentors because they're able to meet with kids frequently and see that they're not in school, notice and reach out and make those connections. So we can't stress enough the importance of national service in this equation, as well as other local community-based organizations that might be in your community. So we just encourage folks to reach out and think about the assets that they may have in their community. And I see a question coming in already. How do we recruit community partnerships and keep them involved? That's a great question. I think I might save it until the end so that we can do it a little more justice, and hopefully Darren can help me out with that one too. So the next element here that we are going to run through is screening, and this is the way that you decide who's a good fit for your program, right? A lot of this has to do with safety, so making sure that the mentors that you have in your program are safe people to be matching with kids. But for a lot of schools, if you're recruiting from within your own school, this is something that you're already doing, and so then it becomes about making sure that each participant really understands what their role is and that they have the right mindset to be a mentor. You want to do an onboarding session for them and help them sort of orient them to their role. And you really want to lean on your community partners for support. Mentor affiliates, for example, some of the folks that we have in different regions throughout the country have really supported this process of screening and helping evaluate who's the right fit and coming up with a protocol for that. So it's just something really, really important to think about. And we always say that all mentors should be screened using a national fingerprint-based FBI criminal background check. Again, something that a lot of schools are already thinking about, but if you are thinking about recruiting from the community, you may not, have a process in place for that. So it's just important to think that through. Then there's training, and training is so essential, not just at the beginning before you match up a mentor with a mentee, but also throughout the relationship. So we just kind of throw this out there to say, think about training as something that's constantly happening from, the minute you recruit a mentor to, halfway through when they say everything's going fine, but something might be kind of up and you are trying to find the right way to ask them, how are you doing? So you might invite them to a training session for existing mentors just to kind of refresh their memory on some things that they might have forgotten about, giving them some examples or some opportunities to connect with each other. So training doesn't have to just be sort of sitting in front of a room in a PowerPoint presentation talking about the life cycle of the relationship or how to form a developmental relationship. It can also look like, peer sharing sessions and things along those lines. We do always recommend an initial training session for mentors, so that's so important to get them off on the right foot. And we also recommend that folks think about a parent training session or a youth training session to help families and students really understand the role of a mentor and how to get the most out of it, out of the experience. So I'm breezing through these, but the next one here is matching and initiation. So this is where you decide who is a good fit for who, which mentor should be matched with which mentee. And we take lots of things into account. We recommend that you do this in a systemic way, that you have some criteria for the way that you match folks up. You know, one way that a lot of Success Mentors programs have used is to ask kids, you know, who in the school do you connect with and who would you like to be matched with? And we can guarantee that that's a relationship that's more likely to last than sort of a random adult that you place in that student's life, because it's someone that the student already feels that they connect with. So if that person is down and really, you know, understands and is ready for that commitment, that could be a really good relationship. But that's not necessarily how every program does it. Sometimes students are matched with folks that they don't know in the school environment. So how do you kind of, you know, initiate that relationship and make sure it gets off on the right foot? There's lots of different strategies that we have used and that programs have used, but the important thing is really breaking the ice, helping that initial connection get made, giving folks something to talk about. So a lot of programs will do that through a structured activity, maybe like a group matching activity, or they might, you know, sort of structure or provide some support for a first initial meeting between the mentor and the mentee. But it's really something that you want to provide support for and make sure that it's, you know, given the attention that it deserves. And also, you know, thinking about the preferences of the parent, the preferences of the young person, the proximity of the mentor and mentee. Are they going to be able to connect during the school day, or are we going to set them up for failure because they're on different sides of campus and have crazy schedules? So thinking those things through and coming up with a way to do that is a really important role of the mentor coordinator. And finally, I'm going to talk about monitoring and support and closure. So these are really, really important pieces of your work as a mentor coordinator, or if you're not a mentor coordinator, just something that you really want to make sure is built into that job description. We want to make sure that this ongoing idea of checking in with the the mentors and the mentees, and hopefully even the parents as much as possible, to sort of find out from everyone's point of view, are things going well? You know, is the student moving towards the goals that we all just, you know, agreed upon for this relationship? And you really want to try to vary the way that you do this. You know, maybe you text the mentors or email the mentors 1 month, and then a few months later maybe you invite them for an in-person session so you can hear a little bit more about what's going on and really sort of troubleshoot some challenges that they might be facing. So it can look a lot of different ways, but the important thing is that you're doing it in an ongoing manner, and you're tracking it, and you're doing it systematically, right? You don't want to just set up a mentor and a mentee and then just sort of hope for the best. You want to make sure that there's a plan in place for them to support them in an ongoing manner, and that really feeds into this idea of closure. So developing some sort of protocol for, you know, when the relationship is going to end, and addressing that from the beginning and saying, you know, this is a year-long relationship, or this is a 3-month relationship, and being clear about that. Because what we do know from the research is that, you know, matches that end poorly can often do more harm than good to kids. So we just want to make sure that there's a plan in place to celebrate successes, to talk about how things went, and then to talk about the future and, you know, what other mentoring opportunities might be available for students if this relationship has come to a close, which all relationships do. So something important to model for youth. So I know I whizzed through those, but really just wanted to give you guys a picture of, you know, what this involves and what this entails. And at this point, I would like to transition over to, we unfortunately can't get to working with peer mentors, and this slide was just to kind of mention that, you know, peer mentoring relationships look a lot different and are something that, you know, require a lot of work and support. So if folks are interested in that, they can reach out to us, and we'll try to provide some resources that we do have. But yeah, at this point, would like to transition over to Darren Person. I neglected to introduce him in the beginning of this webinar because I didn't know I'd be calling on him so early. So I'm going to just briefly introduce him and then kind of turn it over to him to talk about his experience. So Darren is a mentor coordinator for Fresno Unified School District, which is the 4th largest school district in California, where he has implemented nationally recognized programs that serve thousands of students each year. And during his time as the mentor coordinator, Mr. Person has created and implemented programs such as Men's and Women's Alliance, group mentoring, peer mentoring, and e-mentoring. And as he mentioned earlier, he is an MSW. He's a social worker who also serves as an adjunct professor at Fresno State University and Fresno Pacific University. And he provides counseling services to disadvantaged and at-risk individuals and families. So a lot of experience and wealth of knowledge that Darren brings to this conversation. And, you know, I know we have a short session, but I wanted to ask him some questions to kind of, you know, help make this real and sort of hear about his experience implementing these programs. So hello, Darren, and how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to be on with you guys today.
We are so glad to have you. And I thought that maybe you could just start. I know we don't have a ton of time, but just tell us a little bit about the programs that you are currently implementing over there in your district, and what made you want to start a mentoring initiative over there.
For sure. I'll start off with the latter. You know, for us here at Fresno Unified, there's always been, and probably with any other district, groups of students that we see, those that are excelling and those that maybe are still struggling. It could be academics, it could be behavior or attendance. We're surely not just from a deficit approach, but we did, as we looked at our data, as we drilled down, we saw there was a need to just do something different. And as we look deeper into mentoring and the impact mentoring has on students, obviously it's been proven across the board that mentoring does help students in various ways. So as a district, they brought me in about 10 years ago. We started off with about 256 students that were being mentored. 10 years later, you know, we have about almost 4,000 students that are being mentored across our district. And some of the programs that we implemented, we really tried to be creative in our approach, not just one that fits everyone. So we have mentoring from one-on-one, group mentoring, e-mentoring. Obviously, we're involved in the success mentoring program as well. Those are some of the programs that we implemented over the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Darren. Yeah, that's helpful. And one of the things that I think is fascinating about your district is that you have taken so many different approaches and so many different types of models that you've used to meet different students' needs. So I just wanted to see if you could speak a little bit to the way in which you've designed those programs around the needs of your students, because I think that's just such an interesting part of what you do.
Well, thank you. We do try to pride ourselves on being creative. I mean, this is a great community here in Fresno, and I'm sure just across the country people have similar folk that really want to do good things, really want to help students. And I've never had a lack of people that wanted to help, but sometimes because of time or just a lack of knowledge or training, they just don't know how to do it. So for us, what we did, we looked at the needs of our students as well as the needs and schedules of our mentors, and we developed programs based upon that. For example, we started with e-mentoring because I had a group of lawyers and judges that said, Darren, we want to mentor, but our time is limited, and we don't have time. We don't even have a lunch time to come into a school site. So we went on this journey of establishing e-mentoring where you can. It's like the new pen pal approach where you mentor a student once a week via email, which we have a secure site that's always monitored by staff to be able to do that. Really trying to find the needs. Or we had another program where we had a group of Southeast Asian students that when we looked at the data, we noticed that there were issues in the realm of suicide, and we realized that we wanted to kind of tailor a program that fit their needs, and we also had a group of mentors from the community, Southeast Asian community, that wanted to mentor. So we try to find ways that work for both groups, and I think that kind of contributes to, you know, our significant increase in mentoring.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I think it's just so important to customize the model to the specific community of students that you are hoping to help. So such great examples that you shared there. And I think, you know, what I hope to focus on during this session was really the role of the manager of the program, the person who really implements these programs and what that looks like. So I wondered if you could describe your role at the district and what a typical day looks like for you.
Yeah, for sure. It obviously depends on the day. I've been here, had an opportunity to listen in with you guys today, but which has been great to really learn a little bit what everybody is doing across the country. But for me, I supervise We have staff that focuses in on mentoring, and a staff that's in the area, they do recruiting. We do training here. We do site visits at our programs daily. Sure they're following the protocols and the procedures that we set, because when we first came in the district, we had groups that would come in and want to mentor, but we didn't have a solid procedures. So throughout the day, we were able to go and visit those sites. We also have community members, and we call them community liaisons that go, that work for us, and they work at various school sites, either establishing programs or leading some of our groups. So throughout the day, we're doing some of that work. In addition to looking at new creative programs that we can implement, we meet with principals weekly to see what their needs are and see if they have the capacity to be able to bring in a mentoring program. I can say I've never been turned down by one principal. They all have needs. We just try to find a program that fit their needs, so we meet with them consistently. And we do regular trainings for our mentors. We try to do 5 trainings throughout the year where we bring the mentors in at different times to make sure, whether it be communication or social emotional learning or suicide, we bring in various different subject matters that help them to do their job.
That's great to hear. Yeah, it's really interesting to think about how you can coordinate all of that at the district level. And how many schools do you all have in your district that you're working with?
I was getting ready to say we got a whole bunch of them, but we have, it seems like it, for us, we have 7 comprehensive high schools.
Okay.
And we have 14 middle schools, and we have a plethora of about 50 to 65 elementaries.
Wow.
We have about 76,000 students that's in our district.
Wow, it's amazing. Yeah. It's quite a feat to coordinate all of that at the district level, but such a cool example to see how it can be streamlined through the district to provide those services. I wanted to ask you one more question before we open it up to our participants to ask some questions. If you had to give one tip or one recommendation to other mentoring coordinators or managers who are looking to launch one of these programs at their school or at their district, what would that tip be?
Well, we kind of encompass it into like 3 prongs that I kind of use and what I've learned 10 years ago, because when coming to the district, we didn't have a program. So I sat at my desk that I'm sitting at today and just wasn't sure where to go. And obviously, I've told you before, elements of effective practices for mentoring was a viable tool for me because, one, it identifies some procedures and best practices. So I would say number 1 would be to establish an infrastructure that has policies and procedures. That's the reason why we have grown, and we continue to grow significantly. Just over this past month or so, we've probably recruited over 50 to 75 new mentors because we do have infrastructure, we have curriculum, we have, when we get mentors, we don't have to wait, we can connect them really early, which is great. I would say number 2, have a consistent training program because the idea is that people can just naturally help people, which they can, but it's great to have training. And one of the things that we did last year was we did ask those that mentored for us, what did you need more of in mentoring, training was across the board. So having that. Then lastly, I would say be creative. Don't get locked into just one approach. This year, obviously, the Success Mentoring Program has been a new one for us that we're looking at chronic absent students. But in addition to that, we have e-mentoring, group mentoring, where we do what we call a group mentoring, where we have a boys to men and a girl power, where we now have almost 800 students that are being mentored after school or at lunch. Just be creative and see what the needs are and what the strengths are at the school site.
That's awesome, Darren. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's really inspiring to hear what you've done to take the assets in your community and turn them into, real assets for your school, or for your district. So thank you so much for speaking to all of that. And actually have a question that I see in the chat box. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you, Darren, because I think you might have some really good info to share about this from what I've heard. How do I recruit community partnerships and keep them involved?
Great question. One of the things that we noticed in our district to be able to do this job, because we were office of one, then we were office of two, was that the community had to be a viable partner. And I would say for us, what worked was to obviously, as you recruit, to be intentional about recruiting groups. I mean, we've worked with our Boys and Girls Club. We've worked with Big Brothers and Big Sisters, which are bigger groups that do mentoring. But I would say also don't overlook some of the smaller fries, if you will, from church groups to men groups to individuals that want to help. And what we tried to do is to, and it took us probably 5 years, we would have big recruitment fairs, and then we would have an end of the year recruitment, a mentor event where we've invited people from everywhere. And from those events, our last event, we had 500 people there, is that you find different community groups that step up that might give you a business card. And then there lies that hey, I want to be involved in mentoring. How can I do it? And I said, what we've done with those groups is help build their capacity to be a mentoring program. Some of them were 501c3s, nonprofits, some were not. And we tried to help them establish that. And we help provide their training, their screening. We have also did their, because a lot of them don't have money, so background checks and so forth. So I said, try to be a support to those community groups. And what we found is through word of mouth, they also spread the news that they can be partners through our district.
Mm-hmm. So the word of mouth, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, Darren. You've done some really interesting work in that area, so I'm glad to hear you answer that question. Yeah, Dantel, I know we're getting towards the end, so I just wanted to see if you had one more question, or if there are no questions left in the chat box.
One other question did come in. Somebody wanted to know, what are the best ways to engage parents in the mentoring program?
That's a great question.
Yeah, you want me to answer that question?
Yeah, I would love that, Darren.
Okay, all right. I mean, I would say, and a great question, and I would say from my experience, one of the most difficult things to do is to do that, and that's to get our parents involved. We've done various parents events and had limited participation, but we stay the course and we keep trying. But one of the things that we require for any student that's going to be involved in mentor is first for the parent to approve. Once that happens, at any school site, we have we call it a parent night. And it's basically an orientation for the parent to learn the program that the student is going to be involved in. And if they're one-on-one with a mentor, give them more information. And we invite the mentor and the parent, and we have food, and we try to do a big event. And it works pretty well. And that's one way you can start off by getting the parent involved. And as we continue on, we invite them to an end of the year event too, where we kind of acknowledge their student. It's been very helpful in doing that. Just being intentional about it.
Absolutely. Darren, I can't thank you enough for being on with us and really making this real and helping illustrate, what it looks like to be in your role, because I imagine some folks on this line might be, thinking about trying to launch something like what you're doing, and you've really built it from the ground up. So I just want to thank you so much for sharing your insights with us this afternoon.
Look for it. I'm glad you allowed us to have a little time to talk about what we're doing, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know we are running out of time very quickly. We had such a short session today, so I just wanted to transition into some resources and next steps that I can point you to if you are interested in this work, if we haven't talked you out of it, and if you are still excited and feeling kind of jazzed about doing something like this at your school. Here's some resources you may be interested in. So first thing is connect. We think you should definitely reach out to your mentor affiliate if you have one in your local area. If not, I really hope you'll reach out to me. I'll give you my email address in the chat box right now, and we can talk about resources and options for you. But we have so many free resources on the National Mentoring Resource Center website, as well as the opportunity to request technical assistance at no cost to really help you start to implement some of the things that Darren was just talking about and building your program. So we hope you'll check that out. There's also lots of ways to learn more. We definitely recommend that you read the elements. Since I did such a brief overview, didn't even nearly do justice to those important 6 elements. So we really hope you'll dig into that a little bit more and some of these other tools. And you'll receive this PowerPoint afterwards, so you should be able to click these links. And then we also, encourage you to make a plan. So looking at these resources and sort of thinking through what you'd like to do, we've got a planning tool that Attendance Works has created that you can access. It's a worksheet to help you sort of get started and think through next steps, as well as a job description for a site coordinator, which is what Darren was speaking to, some of the site visits he does, checking in on his coordinators. That role is so hugely important to the success of this work, so we hope you'll check out that job description as a way of thinking through next steps. And so we did some Q&A. I have some additional resources here that you'll get when you receive this slide deck. And Dantel, just wanted to kick it over to you to wrap us up.
Thanks, Celia. At this time, we'd like to encourage everyone to participate in a few quick polling questions related to the session. Your responses are completely anonymous, so please answer honestly and help us find ways to improve our approach and content offerings in the future. We sincerely appreciate your feedback. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thanks, Dantel. Thanks, Darren. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Have a great night.
Have a good night, everyone.